By 10 a.m., Lindsay would make this about more than pants, and I would realize I was being set up. My name is Derek Matthews. I'm 47 years old, and I live in Columbia, Maryland. I work as a compliance analyst for a mid-sized defense contractor. My Mondays usually start with burnt coffee from the break room and a slow scroll through the morning emails. But that morning, at exactly 7:03 a.m., a company-wide email landed like a punch to the gut. Subject: Let's look sharp. Team. From Lindsay Harper, HR manager. I read the message twice just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Effective immediately, it said, all employees are expected to adhere to our updated professional dress standards. It went on to ban overly formal or distracting fabric patterns, which, in corporate speak, basically meant my tailored wool slacks. I sat there in my tiny, windowless cubicle, the hum of the fluorescent lights pressing down on me, and took another sip of bitter coffee. Of course, this had Lindsay written all over it. She'd been looking for a way to take me down a notch ever since she found out my salary wasn't far from hers. A fact I hadn't volunteered, but which somehow made its way around the office after last year's budget meeting. Paul, my cubicle neighbor and self-proclaimed team morale booster, once joked, "Derek, you dress like you're auditioning for an FBI reboot." Everyone laughed. I didn't flinch then. I'm not flinching now. The email wasn't about office aesthetics. It was about me. I could practically hear Lindsay's chirpy voice saying, "We want to promote a casual, collaborative atmosphere." Translation: Derek's not fitting in. I clicked back to my spreadsheet on federal contract stipulations, trying to ignore the faint, smug tone of the email. My wool slacks had been with me through 5 contract renewals and countless late nights. They weren't the problem. Lindsay's power trip was. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the email one more time, tapping the edge of my coffee mug. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the fact that she sent it to everyone, a quiet reminder to the entire company that I wasn't part of the team, that I stood out. And in the kind of office where blending in was practically a survival tactic, standing out could be fatal. I told myself it was just another Monday, just another passive-aggressive HR stunt. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end with a memo. I checked the time, 7:36 a.m. I had a couple of hours before the real showdown began. By 10 a.m., Lindsay would come for me in person, and I'd have no choice but to see this for what it was. Not about pants, not about patterns. This was about making me disappear. By 9:42 a.m., I could already smell her perfume. It was the kind that clung to the air like chemical warfare, sweet, powdery, and impossible to ignore. Lindsay strolled past my cubicle, a folder tucked under her arm, her heels clicking like a warning shot. She didn't stop. Not yet. I kept my eyes on the screen, scanning contract language about federal procurement regulations. This was the part of my job I liked. Rules that were written down, that didn't change based on who felt petty on a Monday morning. I thought maybe I'd get lucky and she'd leave it at the email. No such luck. She doubled back. "Hey, Derek!" She dragged it out like a car salesman dangling keys. I glanced up. "Morning, Lindsay. Did you, review the dress code update?" She leaned on the edge of my desk, close enough that the perfume made my throat itch. "I did," I said, turning back to the screen. "Doesn't apply to me." Her smile froze for half a second before snapping back into place. "Oh, it applies to everyone, Derek. We're just trying to keep a unified aesthetic. You know, team spirit." "Cohesion matters to the Pentagon," I said flatly. "They don't care about my pants." I didn't need to look to know her expression had soured. She was used to people nodding and saying, "Sure, Lindsay," not cutting through the nonsense. Right on cue, Paul appeared like her backup singer. He popped his head over my cubicle wall with a grin that made me want to close my laptop and walk out. "Derek, buddy, you see that email? We're all about department cohesion now. We gotta look like a team, man. Team aesthetics." I swiveled my chair just enough to meet his eyes. "Team aesthetics," I repeated. "Paul, the only people who see us are auditors, and they already hate us. You think khakis will make them like you?" Paul chuckled awkwardly, like I had missed his joke. "Just saying, we should all be on the same page, you know? Like a family," I cut in. "We're not a family, Paul. We're a line item on a contract." That shut him up. Lindsay's smile faltered, but she wasn't done. "Derek, you know, she said, lowering her voice just enough to sound faux concerned. It's not just about the pants, it's about the attitude you project. We have high-level clients coming through this week. The wrong impression could, well, it could hurt everyone. There it was, the real bullet. Not about slacks, about me. Is this a formal warning? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Not yet, she said, tilting her head like a teacher scolding a slow student. I turned back to my monitor. Then, I'm going to get back to work. Lindsay straightened up, her perfume lingering like smoke after a gunshot. Paul looked like he wanted to say something, but for once he kept his mouth shut. By the time they walked away, I knew this wasn't over. She wasn't just talking about fabric. She was talking about getting me out. By late morning, the entire floor felt charged, like Lindsay's perfume had somehow seeped into the walls and soured the air. I was wrapping up a compliance report when I noticed her shadow stretching across my desk. "Those pants," she said, drawing out the words with theatrical precision. Interesting choice. Her tone was loud enough for 3 nearby cubicles to catch every syllable. Paul popped his head over the divider like a prairie dog sensing drama. I didn't even look up from my screen. "Is this a formal complaint?" She blinked, thrown off. "What? No, of course not. I'm just saying..." She gestured vaguely, like my slacks were a national security threat. "They stand out." "I'll file that under personal opinion," I said, clicking my mouse. Her smile tightened. "Come on, Derek. This is just a conversation, man to man, or..." She tilted her head with faux friendliness. "Colleague to colleague." I finally turned my chair to face her. "Then why are you talking to me like I'm on trial?" Lindsay glanced around to make sure the audience was still engaged. "We're trying to maintain a certain image here. Clients come through and the first thing they notice is whether we can keep them out of federal trouble," I interrupted. "Trust me, none of them are critiquing fabric choices." Paul stifled a laugh, then immediately realized Lindsay was glaring at him. Derek, maybe there's just, room for compromise," he said, voice trailing off like a coward waving a white flag. "Compromise?" I asked. "What does that look like? We all wear matching uniforms? Khakis and a smile?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, her voice hardening. "Then stop performing," I replied, keeping my tone calm. Just then, Rick, our boss, walked by with a folder tucked under his arm. His eyes flicked between us, me sitting calm, Lindsay with her arms crossed like a prosecutor. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then decided against it and disappeared into his office. Coward. Lindsay caught the glance and smirked like she had just won a point. "Rick's aware of the new standards," she said, straightening up. "If you're unwilling to adapt, well, people might start questioning if you're really a team player." I raised an eyebrow. "People or just you?" "Derek," she leaned in slightly, dropping her voice so only I could hear. "You have a certain attitude. The kind that creates the wrong impression with high-level clients. It's not just about pants, it's about optics." There it was. The threat wasn't veiled anymore. I leaned back in my chair and gave her the smallest, coldest smile I could manage. "If my clearance and my work history aren't enough to reassure your clients, a change of trousers won't save you." Her eyes narrowed, and for a second she didn't know what to say. Paul shuffled nervously, muttering something about getting back to his spreadsheets. When they both finally walked off, I knew the shift had happened. This wasn't about clothes. She was fishing for something bigger, something she couldn't control, and I wasn't planning to give her anything. At 3:12 p.m., a calendar notification popped up on my screen. HR matter, immediate attention. No message body, no agenda, just a location. Conference room, a C. It didn't take a genius to know what this was. I grabbed my notepad out of habit, though I doubted I'd need it. When I walked into the room, Lindsay was already seated at the head of the table, posture perfect, smile polished, like she was running for office. Paul sat 2 chairs to her right, drumming his fingers nervously on a legal pad. Across from him was Cal Morton from operations, looking like he'd been dragged there against his will. "Derek," Lindsay said with fake warmth, gesturing toward the lone empty chair. "Thanks for coming on such short notice." I sat down without responding. My eyes drifted to the neat stack of papers in front of her. HR forms, typed out in bold bullet points. I recognized the template. "We'll get straight to the point," she began, her voice rehearsed. We've had ongoing concerns regarding your adherence to our updated dress code policy. In addition, your behavior today has been described as dismissive and, well, insubordinate. By who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Lindsay folded her hands. By multiple parties. Her eyes flicked to Paul, who avoided my gaze. Paul cleared his throat. It's not personal, Derek. We have to think about the whole department. I leaned back, crossing my arms. And my slacks are bringing down morale. Cal shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't saying a word, but his eyes said plenty. I don't want to be here. Lindsay ignored my question and slid the papers toward me. As of today, we are terminating your employment, effective immediately, for non-compliance and repeated challenges to leadership directives. I skimmed the first page. Not one word about my work. Not a single mention of the contracts I'd managed, the compliance audits I'd navigated without a single red flag. Just vague, hollow phrases about team alignment and attitude. You're firing me over a dress code memo? I said, voice calm. This isn't just about dress code, she replied quickly, too quickly. It's about the image you project and how it affects our client relationships. Funny, I said, setting the papers down, because the clients you're talking about don't even know who you are, but they know me. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. We appreciate your contributions, Derek. This is just a business decision. A business decision, I repeated, nodding slowly. Right. I stood up, tucking my chair back with deliberate slowness. Lindsay, Paul, Cal, I said, looking at each of them. You just made a mistake that's going to cost this company a whole lot more than khaki cohesion. Lindsay narrowed her eyes. Is that a threat? No, I said. It's a fact. You just tossed out the only person who understands the fine print of our federal contracts, well enough to keep them from collapsing in front of an auditor. Good luck with that. Cal's head jerked up. His face went pale. Paul looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Lindsay straightened her papers, pretending not to care, but her hand trembled slightly as she stacked them. I walked to the door, paused, and glanced back. When this blows up in your face, and it will, remember this conversation. Then I left, the weight of the building shifting behind me like a ship about to sink. I returned to my cubicle with a numb kind of clarity. My career here wasn't ending with a bang, just a slow shuffle out the door. I grabbed the small box I kept under my desk and began packing what little I had. A framed photo of my niece, the coffee mug with the chipped handle, and the stubborn little cactus I'd managed to keep alive for 3 years, despite Paul's helpful overwatering. The office had gone quiet, not silent, but that weird charged quiet where everyone is pretending not to stare. I could feel eyes on me as I wrapped the mug in an old meeting agenda and tucked it into the box. Paul appeared briefly, hovering like he wasn't sure if he should gloat or offer condolences. Hey, sorry, man. You know, it's just how things go sometimes. Yeah, I said, not looking up. Sometimes they go downhill. He gave a tight, awkward smile, then retreated. I walked past the cubicles, one slow step at a time. A few coworkers muttered half-hearted, good luck, the kind of thing people say when they're relieved it's not them. Rick, my boss, stood near the break room like he'd just come out of hiding. He glanced at me and mumbled, "Good luck out there, Derek," before slipping back into his office. Not even eye contact. I didn't bother replying. At the security desk, I pulled my high clearance badge from around my neck and slipped it into its protective case. That badge had more weight than any HR policy. It was the reason auditors called me instead of Lindsay. It was the reason our contracts never hit a snag. They had no idea what they just tossed away. I tucked the badge into my shirt pocket, lifted my box, and pushed through the glass doors. The lobby air felt heavier than usual. My steps echoed as I moved toward the revolving doors, each one punctuated by a dull hum of anger building in my chest. They thought this was the end of me. Then the lobby doors swung open. 2 men in dark suits walked in, their presence cutting through the room like a knife. They moved with a purpose that wasn't corporate. This was federal. The taller one flashed a badge I recognized immediately. Defense Security Service, he said to the receptionist. We need security and the CEO now. Every conversation in the lobby stopped. People froze mid-step, mid-sentence, mid-breath. I felt the shift instantly. The The receptionist fumbled for the phone, her hands trembling. Yes, sir. Right away. The agent scanned the room, eyes sharp. One of them, a woman with cropped hair and a calm, no-nonsense face, looked at me briefly as if measuring me. And just like that, I understood. My termination wasn't just a bad HR move. It had tripped something much bigger. As I stepped aside, clutching my box, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. My humiliation was already morphing into something sharper, cleaner. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I set my box down on the nearest lobby chair and watched as the two agents moved with precision. Their presence wasn't casual. These were the kind of people who didn't waste steps. The taller one, a man with sharp eyes and a clipped tone, introduced himself as Agent Collins. His partner, a woman with short dark hair and an unshakable calm, was Agent Vega. They flashed badges to the receptionist, who nearly dropped the phone. Defense Security Service. We need the CEO and head of security. Immediately, Collins said. The receptionist stammered something about calling upstairs, her voice trembling. The whole lobby felt like it was holding its breath. I stayed seated, watching the scene unfold. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to leave, but something in the way Vega glanced at me made me stay put. It was a look of recognition, like she knew I wasn't part of the problem, but maybe part of the solution. The minutes ticked by. I saw the panic ripple through the building. Security hustled over, whispering into radios. A few employees from upstairs trickled into the lobby, eyes wide, phones in hand, already texting someone. Then Lindsay appeared, Paul trailing behind her like a shadow. Their faces were pale. Paul tried to play it off with a nervous smile, but Lindsay's composure was cracked. She looked at the agents, then at me, then back at them, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Mr. Matthews?" Collins asked suddenly, turning toward me. "Yes." "Could you step over here with us?" His tone was professional, but not hostile. I stood, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the lobby. "Am I in trouble?" I asked. "Not at all," Vega said, with a slight smile. "We just need a quick word." I walked over, box still in hand. Collins lowered his voice. "You were recently terminated, correct?" "About 20 minutes ago." Vega nodded, as if confirming something. "Your name triggered an alert when your clearance was deactivated. You're listed as the primary compliance officer for the federal contract this site is handling. Without your oversight, this entire operation is under review." I almost laughed. "So firing me wasn't a great idea?" "You could say that," Collins replied, glancing toward Lindsay, who was now visibly sweating. The CEO, Brian Denning, finally arrived, red-faced and clearly rattled. He tried to smooth his tie and sound authoritative, but his voice cracked slightly when he spoke to the agents. "What's the issue here?" "The issue," Collins said, "is that your company is now non-compliant with multiple security requirements. We'll need a full audit, starting now." I stood there quietly, watching the color drain from Brian's face. He looked at me, then at Lindsay, then back at me. "Derek," he said, his tone suddenly syrupy, "I think we may have acted hastily. Let's talk about getting you reinstated, with a raise, 15%. Lindsay's mouth fell open. I tilted my head. "Now you want to talk?" The agent said nothing, but Vega's eyes glimmered like she was enjoying this turn of events. For the first time all day, I felt the power shift. Brian Denning looked like a man who'd just been told the Titanic could still be saved if he paddled hard enough. He pulled out a chair across from me and tried for a smile, but the sweat gathering at his temples gave him away. "Derek," he began, his voice all false warmth, "let's put this nonsense behind us. I'll get your termination reversed, effective immediately. How about a 15% raise to start?" I didn't move. The two DSS agents stood nearby, watching like they were evaluating both of us. "I'm listening," I said, though my tone made it clear I wasn't. Brian leaned forward, clasping his hands together like we were old friends. "You know how vital you are. That dress code thing was a misunderstanding." Lindsay got overzealous. "Let's fix this today." Lindsay, standing off to the side, flinched slightly at her name. I glanced at her, then back at him. "You're right about one thing," I said evenly. "Lindsay did get overzealous, and you backed her up. That tells me all I need to know about how you run this place." Paul shifted uncomfortably, his usual smirk gone. Brian's voice took on a desperate edge. "Derek, think this through. We can work out a promotion, Senior compliance lead, new title, new pay bracket. Just say the word. I stood, setting my box on the chair. The salary you can afford won't cover the therapy for working here, I said flatly. The entire lobby went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Paul looked like he wanted to melt into the wall. Lindsay's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Collins, the taller agent, gave a slight nod, like he approved of my line. Vega's expression softened, just barely, as if she respected the stance. Brian looked stunned, like I'd just spoken another language. You're really walking away? I picked up my box. I walked away the moment you decided a pair of pants was more important than the federal contract keeping this place afloat. I turned toward the doors, but paused just long enough to catch Lindsay's eye. She looked small now, like all the power she'd been clinging to had evaporated. As the agents followed me, Collins turned back to the CEO. We'll be speaking with your leadership team in detail, Mr. Denning. There are concerns. The look on Brian's face told me he knew exactly what that meant. Vega opened the lobby door for me. We'll finish our conversation outside, she said quietly. I stepped into the crisp air, feeling lighter. Behind me, the building felt like a sinking ship, but I wasn't done watching it go under. Through the lobby's glass doors, I could see the storm brewing upstairs. Collins and Vega had vanished into the executive wing, with Brian, Lindsay, and security trailing behind them. I stayed where I was, leaning against the reception desk, my box at my feet like a footnote to this day. It didn't take long for the volume to rise. A conference room door slammed, and I caught sight of Collins through the frosted glass, standing like a man delivering a verdict. He slapped a thick manila folder on the table. Even from this distance, I could feel the energy shift. Lindsay sat near the end of the table, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes darting everywhere but at the agents. Brian, who had been puffed up with false confidence in the lobby just 20 minutes ago, looked like someone had deflated him. He leaned over the folder, scanning pages that must have read like a death sentence. A junior assistant scurried past me, whispering to another employee. They're listing breaches, 6 of them, all HR related. Her eyes widened when she glanced at Lindsay's pale face. She's the one they're focusing on. I couldn't hear everything, but I didn't need to. Colin's voice carried, steady and firm, as he ticked off each violation. I caught snippets. Improper clearance tracking, data mismanagement, federal compliance breach. Lindsay's posture crumbled. She tried to speak, gesturing weakly, but Collins cut her off with a raised hand. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Paul appeared in the lobby, standing stiffly near the elevators, clearly too afraid to join whatever inquisition was unfolding upstairs. He gave me a quick glance, like he was hoping for some kind of reassurance, but I just looked past him. He'd picked his side earlier. Inside the conference room, the mood turned darker. Brian ran a hand down his face and sat heavily, his shoulders slumped. I could practically see the math in his head. $50 million in federal contracts, all hanging by a thread that I used to hold. Lindsay finally dropped her gaze, staring at the table like it might open up and swallow her. Her lips moved, maybe trying to bargain or spin, but Collins leaned forward, his expression stern. Whatever he said next, it shut her up completely. One of the security managers stepped out to make a phone call, looking rattled. I heard him mutter, "The contract might be void. We're officially under review." I didn't gloat. There was no need. Watching their carefully built house of cards collapse in real time was enough. Then Vega turned, her sharp eyes finding me through the glass. She gave a small nod and walked toward me. "Derek," she said, her voice low and calm, "we may want to talk to you separately. We could use someone with your knowledge of these contracts." Behind her, Lindsay was practically crumbling in her chair, unable to meet my eyes. For someone who spent her career trying to project control, she looked like the weakest person in the building. The agents weren't finished yet, but I could tell they were already deciding who was worth saving. The cool air outside felt like the first real breath I'd taken all day. I stood on the steps, box in hand, watching through the glass as the conference room chaos continued upstairs. It was like watching a ship sink from the safety of a lifeboat. Agent Vega joined me first, her heels clicking against the stone. She had that calm authority that made you instinctively stand a little straighter. "You handled that well," she said. Not everyone walks out with their dignity intact. I gave a small shrug. Didn't feel that way when they marched me out of the building. Yeah, well, she said with a faint smile. They just realized how badly they screwed up. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a cream-colored card, holding it between two fingers. We subcontract oversight roles for sensitive contracts. Pays better than what they were giving you, and we don't care about your pants. I couldn't help but laugh. The first real laugh I'd had all day. I took the card, sliding it into the same pocket where my badge still rested. The weight of it felt different. Not heavy, but solid, like leverage. Collins appeared beside her, adjusting his tie. If you're interested, call the number. We like people who know how to keep things from falling apart when everyone else is playing office politics. I nodded. Sounds better than being thrown out over khaki culture. Vega smirked. Exactly. Behind the glass doors, I saw Brian pacing like a man cornered. Lindsay was slumped in a chair, her confidence reduced to nothing but a clenched jaw and pale face. Paul, of course, had vanished, probably hiding behind a vending machine somewhere. I turned away from the building. You two go handle the rest. I think my part's done here. Vega gave a quick nod. We'll be in touch, Derek. Don't let them rattle you. I walked to my car slowly, the late afternoon sun bouncing off the hood. Every step I took away from that building, the humiliation I'd felt earlier melted into something sharper. Not anger, more like quiet satisfaction. They'd tried to bury me with a fake memo in corporate theater, but now they were the ones choking on their own mistakes. I set my box in the back seat and slid behind the wheel. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd just leveled up into a game they weren't even qualified to play. As I pulled out of the parking lot, the building loomed behind me, its mirrored windows reflecting a corporate world I was no longer part of. It looked smaller already, like a cheap prop for a play I'd been cast in without knowing the script. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Through the glass lobby doors, I could still see shadows moving. Brian pacing, Lindsay probably trying to salvage her career, Paul lurking somewhere hoping no one noticed his silence. They'd spend weeks scrambling, begging the DSS for leniency, and every single one of them would know that this disaster started the moment they decided to come after me over a pair of pants. I rolled down the driver's window and let the stale office air escape. The sharp winter breeze cut through the leftover bitterness in my chest, leaving behind something cleaner. Satisfaction, maybe? Not revenge. Just the cold clarity of justice landing exactly where it belonged. I tapped the cream-colored card Agent Vega had given me, still tucked in my pocket next to my badge. It felt like a key to a door I hadn't even known I wanted to walk through. A better league, a bigger arena, no HR memos, no fake smiles, no petty politics about slacks or team aesthetics. For years, I'd convinced myself that working here was a career, that staying quiet and blending in was the only way to survive corporate life. Today proved the opposite. The moment I stopped playing their game, I saw how weak their whole system really was. As I hit the main road, I thought about the people still inside, the ones who'd kept their heads down, pretending not to see what was happening. They weren't bad people, not really, just stuck. The way I'd been stuck for too long. The light ahead turned green. I pressed the gas, watching the building shrink further in the mirror until it was nothing but a blur. I didn't feel the urge to look back again. A long day had started with burnt coffee and a ridiculous email about dress codes. It ended with me holding the one thing they could never take, my own worth. I cracked the window, letting the cold air rush in. It carried away the last of that sterile office smell clinging to my clothes. By the time I reached the highway, I wasn't thinking about Lindsay or Brian anymore. I was thinking about the number on that cream-colored card and what I'd say when I called it. For the first time in years, I wasn't heading home defeated. I was driving towards something better.